You are listening to I Am Refocused podcast with your host, Shemaya Reed. This podcast is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. Now, let's tune into today's podcast.
This is I Am Refocused podcast, and just like every single Thursday, we are here at Rockefeller's Barbershop. Shout out to Rico Rodriguez. If you're here in San Antonio, make sure you get your haircut here. We have an awesome show lined up for y'all today. We have a cool guest, if I can say that.
You can say it.
Mr. Kelley Crooks. He is retired Colonel, Air Force. Tell us a little about yourself, sir.
Well, hey, good morning, and this is a pretty cool place to have a podcast, man. I love it. You know, Rico's over here telling us all about all the things that I haven't never known before in my life, and now I have to sit on my hands for the rest of my life because I know all the gang symbols and what's going on in the country, and he's got all the news. So come on down here and get your hair cut and listen to something, because you learn when you come down here. But
it's a barbershop.
It is a barbershop.
Gotta
love this. And thanks for having me on. And yeah, I grew up Air Force. My dad was in the Air Force. My whole family, all the way back to almost the Civil War, and even farther. We got remnants like swords and guns from back then, and the Elmers and this were in the war. And so my dad was in the Air Force. He and Mom met at Penn State, so that's a Big Ten rivalry, but we have a good time. And he joined the Air Force in around the 50s and came in, and he's been a flyer. So growing up, I got 4 brothers. I'm the middle of 5. Mm-hmm. And he flew around a lot, so Mom basically raised us. And we weren't little kids. We weren't, easygoing kind of kids. We were good kids. We didn't do anything too bad. I mean, every one of us had our little issues with girls and fires and, climbing on roofs and doing the things that kids do, right?
Yeah.
And breaking this and gouging out that. But, she did pretty good. She was a great mom, and they're both still around, and they'll probably be listening to this sometime. They're down in Melbourne. But Dad flew around a lot from Guam all over around the world, doing scientific stuff, doing, refueling. Went to Vietnam a couple times, so we as kids knew what that was like with a parent gone for a year. And a couple times he was there, so knowing that, he was over there in danger. But it's kind of interesting to be mostly a middle-class kind of family. Mm-hmm. Little houses, nothing too big.
Yeah.
So the brothers and I all kind of got stuck in a room, and you had to beat each other up, and fight for beds and fight for food, and hide the Playboys under the mattresses and all the things you do. And so we grew up and ended up in Ohio, and I graduated high school up there, and went to University of Hampshire for 1 year. Mm-hmm. Then went back to Ohio State because people in New Hampshire were a little bit different. I was used to the more Midwest polite society, and they were more cliquish up there, I thought.
In Ohio State, that's where you got your communications.
Communications bachelor's. Basically, I wanted to be a nuclear engineer, and
no pressure.
In New Hampshire. Took all these courses, and then I realized that everybody else around me were nuclear engineers. They were smarter than me, and they were really nerds. And I wasn't really a nerd. And I would ask about the Steelers, Pittsburgh Steelers, and they'd go, "Oh yeah, steel, alloys," and we'll talk about formulas and this and that. No, linebackers, running backs. No. I had to go back to Ohio State, and where they knew what football was. And so my brothers, 2 oldest brothers, and I were at Ohio State, and we had a great time. One thing about Ohio State is that when you go to football games, usually you got guys are, if you're a freshman, you get the worst seats, and then as you get up to senior, you get good seats. Mm-hmm. Well, they always kept us because we wanted to be together. My 2 brothers and I were always a freshman because one was a freshman, then the next one move up, There's always a freshman. Yeah. And then when all 3 of us moved up, my oldest brother went into law school there, and he became a freshman again. We never got out of the South stands for 4 years. And
so y'all love those seats.
Oh, the wind, the snow, and things. But, we know the South stands pretty well.
Now, is it like the University of Michigan?
It is.
Is it like that stadium where everyone's packed in? Like
everybody's packed in.
So when everyone does a wave, you had no choice. You
go up. Your arms may not go up because they're stuck, but it's amazing how when you get older, those seats get smaller. Though I don't know if it's the seats or us, but it's fun. There's nothing like watching a Ohio State game. But growing up and having the brothers, we moved about every other year. and or every couple years. And so one thing about growing up as a kid in the military, my kids moved 5, 6 times. We moved 5, 6, 7 times, and you learn to make acquaintances really quick. You learn to talk to people. My one youngest brother was like 5 or 6, and he'd walk down in Ohio and just knocked on doors, said, "You got any kids that know, or my age that I can play with?" That's how open you could be.
I'm only going to be here for a limited time.
Yeah, I'm only here a couple of years. I got to make acquaintances. But you didn't really learn to make those lifelong buddies, the kids. As if you grew up in one place. So that really creates a personality of being open and honest and just being able to talk to people. But I don't know if you trust people that quick.
It's true.
You haven't really gotten to that point where you learn to be that buddy, that friend, that person that you always could call. You knew they were going to be your best man or whatever at your wedding, 20 years from now or whatever. Right. And it's an interesting thing where later on in life it makes it a little bit easy to say hi to people, but not. Right now I couldn't tell you a handful of people from high school. I went back to the 40-year reunion, and I knew about 5 or 6 people, and we all talked and things. But when I left, it was, you're gone again. Yeah. And so that's a hard life for kids in the military. The positive side is you get to go a lot of places. Kids. I talk to kids in my 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th grade here, and they go, "We've never left San Antonio. We never left Texas." I was in Hawaii and New Hampshire, and Texas, California, all kinds of different states, moving around, seeing different things. We drove back and forth across the country because, back in those 50s, 60s, 70s, it wasn't that much flight. And you can't really, Dad couldn't afford to take 7 people on an airplane all the time.
That's a lot of tickets.
Yeah, and you had to drive. So we saw a lot of America. So you learn up, you grow up a little bit learned. And you understand a lot of stuff. You get to know things that other kids don't really know as far as experience. But on the bad side is that, you leave friends a lot, that kind of thing.
When it was your time to join the Air Force, take us back to your earliest memory when you joined the Air Force. What was that first month like?
Well, you come down here to officer training school. I worked my way through college at Ohio State and bagging groceries and gas stations and things. And then, so I came down here and the earliest, it's funny, everybody's given a roommate. And my roommate was this archaeologist major. And he was so nervous. I'm a dependent, so I know a little bit about the military. So I was kind of cool, I understood they're not going to hit you, they're not going to beat you up or anything, and they're just going to yell at you. Yeah. But his fists were clenched all the time. He was stiff all the time, and there are all kinds of different people there. But it was a little bit nerve-wracking, but not so bad. It wasn't like basic training. I think they treat us a little bit different. The first assignment went to Mississippi and did the normal things that lieutenants do. They go to school, they learn some stuff, and so they took me to comm school. And one day they said, "Hey, anybody want to take this test? It's called the AFQTC, whatever, some sort of qualification test to be a computer programmer." And I raised my hand, and he said, "You want to go?" I said, "No, I just have a question. Do we get out of class if we go take this test?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, I'm there. I had no idea, but just to get out of class. So me and Robin Wolf, we raised our hand, took this test, did pretty good, went and became computer programmers. And so it's kind of like in the Air Force from then on. That's probably one of the only decisions I ever made. From then on, they make it for you.
You just show up.
You just show up. And my career was unique and different. It was very different in the fact that every 2 years they would send me somewhere that I had no idea what I was going to be doing. I was out of a fish out of water, and they trusted me enough, I guess, to learn the leadership things and to learn the technical things. So I was a computer programmer, systems analyst, the first job in Oklahoma. Went down as a young lieutenant to advanced comm school. Most of them were captains and majors. The cool thing about that was it was international at the time. And so it was this long school. I was getting a master's also with it. But the Air Force paid for me to go to this advanced course, and it was pretty in-depth. And but we had people from Egypt and Israel and Peru and Argentina and I mean all over the world. We had these international officers. So that was kind of cool about the Air Force, is that you learn and meet people from other cultures, other countries, and you start learning that you need to treat people one-on-one. No matter where you're from, no matter what you do, see what they do, enjoy what they do, and learn from it. Like we'd have a fish fry, and we'd bring out a huge, 2 or 3 foot redfish. And most of the Western cultures would eat from the neck gills down. The Singapores would eat from the gills up. And so they'd pop out the eyeballs and all those pieces, and the other guys would from I guess it was Egypt or somewhere. They'd bring in a bag, a brown bag. We had a barbecue. People would bring hot dogs and burgers, and they brought this stuff in this bag, and they just dumped it, and there was a whole bunch of these little baby squid, and they put them on the barbecue, and they were pretty good. But you learn. Yeah. Everybody's a little different. The cultures are different, and you look at it and you appreciate it. You go, oh, that is cool. Let me try that. And you learn to try things.
That's very interesting, because the whole concept of approaching it one-on-one, every time you got into a new environment, what's that mindset for you when you were growing, I would say growing up, but as you were experiencing the military journey? What's that mindset?
It is an interesting where I never had, growing up, any kind of biases or things, because you never knew who was going to live next to you. You never knew what was going on around you. You were on base a lot of times, so the military throws everybody together, and so your neighbors, whatever, from all parts of the country. And it wasn't until later on in high school, college, that you really start seeing what happens around you, the biases and political biases and things. But as a kid, you just, whoever was around, you just said, hey, and what's going on? And then you learn a little bit. So we were in Hawaii, and so there's a lot of cultural changes there. And there are some, we talk about gangs and things over there. It's the locals, the local Hawaiians, the Samoans, and that culture versus the Howleys, the white guys who come in. And there's been, stories where young kids will go over to Hawaii, or they go to Guam or whatever, and they'll just get beat up because they're white. I know I took karate. Right, I took karate and I got the purple belt or whatever
wax
belt
on,
I'm doing. Yeah, wax on, and I thought I was really cool, and my gi and everything. Yeah. And I'd still walk down the middle of the street to give myself that extra 5-10 seconds to run if somebody came out of the woods or something
smart.
at me. Yeah, no matter how good you are.
Speaking of culture and speaking of politics, you did have a period where you served at the White House.
Yeah.
How did that opportunity come, and what was that experience like?
Well, I got the assignment because I was at school. Air Command and Staff School is the professional military education for majors. And assignments, people come down there and they ask, they start talking about where you want to go. And I drew this line. I said, anywhere you want to send me, and I drew a line except Washington, D.C. So, of course, I get a note a couple weeks later that says, come get an interview at Washington, D.C. And so I go up there, and they didn't tell me where it was. And I show up, and it's the White House Communications, and I'm in this room with 7 or 8 people. And we do interviews, and they talk to us, and they give us scenarios, and they want to find out what kind of person you are. And the deputy commander was interviewing me, and he says, I just want you to know that they sent your name up once, and we didn't think you were qualified to be here. I said, great, clapped my hand, said, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go back. And he goes, but let's try this anyway. And sure enough, they said, okay, you're good, you can stay. And it was during the Clinton administration in the 60s, or 96 and 97, and that time period. And it was a great job. Because of my communications background, I tended to get the Hollywood, L.A. gigs when Clinton went out there all the time to see movie stars and people. And then I'd get New York, and we'd stay at the Waldorf Astoria, and we'd go out, So your job was, you had a lot of glamour, you had a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
So, for instance, let's say you go to New York and you're in this, upscale 5-star hotel, because that's where you're staying, and you're close, you want to be close by. you go in there in a C-141 or a C-5 in jeans, you're all sweating, you're dragging all these luggage and about 10,000 pounds of equipment.
Yeah.
You know, you get it off the plane, you put it into the hotel, but you only go up the back elevator so nobody can see you. You know, you fill in everything, and then you go, you know, after all this hard work and setting things up, then you go put on your suit, and then it becomes the glamour side, you know, and you go out and meet people and you try and set up his events. So a lot of people don't know that the military actually runs the White House, basically the audio-visual and his sound and his lights and all his everything that has to do with his presentation, with the exception of deciding where it is and what it has to look like. So you got staffers who will be out there, and they'll say, okay, we want to go to this place, and here's what it looks like. And so the White House Communications Agency they own the podium. They build the podium. That weighs about 300 pounds. People don't know that. It has all this armor in it.
Wow.
The top part of it looks kind of gray, but it's like a blue-gray paint that they put on so it won't get fingerprints and things as he holds it and other people grab it, so it's nice and clean. It has a little step stool in the back, and so that short people can get up on it. Because there's nothing worse than being behind the presidential podium and you only see the top of your head.
Yeah.
That's happened a few times. Yeah. So they got a step stool, and so the podium, the symbol out in front is made by the military and is held by the military. The sound goes out to our director. Military director runs the sound system from that microphone. The teleprompters, the radio systems for the Secret Service, the radio system throughout the town. So what they have to do for the president is that you create an umbrella of radio coverage and everywhere. And so that no matter where he goes, within a second or two, you should be able to have him talk to do his jobs. And the president, you know, has three jobs. One is head of state, one is chief executive, one is commander-in-chief. So those three jobs have to make sure that if he's in his limo and he's in a tunnel, how does it call? And so we have a vehicle that's called a Roadrunner that is a kind of like a relay system at the top level of security. People think it's a military vehicle because it has this black dome on top, and they think, oh, there's some sort of laser gun. It's really just a satellite, you know, downlink. Wow. But yeah, it relays things back and forth. So if he goes in the tunnel, they'll kind of lay back and you know, be able to have that sound, you know, connection so that he can call out until he's out the other end. So they always thinking about how to make sure that they have communications. And Air Force One, we plug Air Force One. You do all kinds of things. So you really learn from A to Z what it takes to put the president on the air that everybody sees. And it was really fun, and got to meet a lot of interesting people. People that, you know, you're too young to even know. Maybe your mom knows. You remember Liza Minnelli and Tony Bennett? Yes. So
okay.
I'm in L.A. He's doing a CBS special, and I'm going, and every place he goes has to have a presidential hold. That's where you put a secure phone. You have where he changes, where he goes if he has to make any kind of official stuff. And so I'm in this hold, and I'm putting on my radio and my, you know, jacket before the event. In walks Tony Bennett and Liza Minnelli, and it's just the three of us in this room. And I'm going, this is cool, you know. I'm just staring at the mirror because I'm letting them do their thing. They're talking, and he's an artist, and he's a charcoal kind of artist. So he painted her picture, and he was presenting it to her.
Wow.
And so I'm kind of watching this, and it's kind of a nice, you know, you learn that they're actually people too. You know, they're people. And so she was appreciative, and it was kind of cool of them because they go, hey, you know, what do you think? What are you going to say? Yeah, I could do better.
Yeah, a good joke.
Yeah.
Not getting promoted.
Yeah, no.
No.
Yeah, I was nice. I said, oh, that's great, you know, and it's wonderful. But, you know, you can't be that gaga person. One of the funny things is that if you're caught, you know, they have a military photographer, all his pictures and things. So if you're ever caught on camera with the president, you know, by the photographer or on TV or something, you owe the other people who catch you a case, you know, of beer, root beer, whatever. So I'm out on the golf course with him, and Eric Cantor. This is during the debates with Bob Dole, and Eric Cantor is the negotiator. So he calls. And when he's out golfing, the comm guy has a golf cart. And that golf course is a satellite uplink that we have to create, a secure phone, non-secure phone. And so you got all this comm on this little golf cart with antennas sticking up. And so he calls, and I pick up the phone. I'm talking to him, and President Clinton is out there golfing. And he's on the putting green. and he's getting ready to putt, and he putts and he misses. And I'm saying, sir, he'll be right here. He's still on the green. He's putting. And then I go into my golf voice. And the president is on the fifth hole. It's a dogleg left, and has about a 4-foot putt. And he hit it a little bit too hard. And he's a little bit upset, but I think he's going to do all right. And I started, and he 4 putts, and he was livid. He was mad at himself. And he comes over, and I hand him the phone. Sir, it's Eric Cantor on the phone talking about debates. Okay, and he takes it. He takes it, and all of a sudden he goes, "What are you laughing at?" And Cantor's just dying over there. He says, and gives a look at me. Well, at the time, the photographer takes my picture with him, and then the switchboard sends me a text. The old pagers. I look down, so I'm looking down at my pager saying, "You owe us a case."
That's pretty good.
Yeah, so that's something we do.
I mean, this is very interesting. Have you ever, off record, on record, had any opportunity to have a small talk with the president at that time?
Not
like
really.
Hello.
There's always that, because one of the other things is when you hear announcements, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, that is a young military person. Well, the officer is supposed to stand beside the military to make sure that nobody bothers them.
Okay.
Because the staffers will go, go, go. No, you only listen to me. I don't care if it's the chief of staff or whatever, because they'll want him to go, and the president's not ready. I only get my sit. Yeah. So I had one where he was supposed to be on a live radio, a TV show, and I told him, "Sir, what's going to happen? It's an award show." And I said, "Okay, sir, what's going to happen is that this person's going to be called out. They're going to clap. She's going to go up there. They're going to clap, and then she'll talk a little bit. Then they're going to clap, and then as she's sitting down, we'll announce." Well, she got up there. They clapped. She goes up there, grabs her award, and leaves. Doesn't talk. So there's only 2 claps, right? And I say, "Okay, do the announcer." He goes, "There was only 2 claps. You said there'd be 3 claps." "Sir, it's live TV. You can either stay in here or you can go out there." He goes, "Oh, damn." He started cussing. And he left. But, you do get you talk to a lot of people, Panetta, Leon Panetta and those folks, and it's fun, but I wasn't a limelight kind of guy. If it happened, it happened. I was more of I love helping out the troops and the people in the background, the telephone people, or the people who set up things. I would put, the telephone maintenance guy at an event. They had to be there to make sure that all the systems were working or the telephones didn't go down and all that. And so I'd tell the guy, wear a suit. And I put him right in the middle of things. And I put one guy, one thing in L.A. where this telephone kid, he came out in a suit. I said, "Leave your belt here. If you got an emergency, I'll come get you." And I put him in a seat that I knew who would be sitting next to him. And it was the Secretary of Defense and the Assistant Secretary of State. And he's sitting there going, he was just had this big, huge grin on his face. I said, "Now, don't tell him who you are. Just talk to them, because they don't know who you are, and you might be somebody important." So he had a whole event where he was sitting there talking to these big wigs. Wow. And he loved it. And if you take care of the troops, the people who were helping, I always found that your event went a lot better. And you had more fun because you really did something for people who don't get that opportunity. I was given an opportunity to be there, and they weren't. And here's this opportunity they can help, a presidential event, and they can talk to their grandkids or whatever. I was there at CBS, and I talked to that guy and that guy, and it really makes their life.
I mean, it ties back to what you said earlier in the segment before we close this first half about that one-on-one type communication situation. Because even though you're part of this big whole group putting this but this event together to be a successful
You can call it a show.
You can call it a show.
It's presidential politics.
But you have the opportunity, like you said, to make those small connections with key people. Because who's to say that kid, after that experience, had a confidence booster? Yeah. Because now he's saying to himself, "Man, there's a little bit more to this job."
There is, yeah. It happens. Even the kids in the military. I mean, those announcers, they're young NCOs. They're young kids. And they have voices, and some are men, some are women, and sometimes the president doesn't like a certain voice, and they may, say, "No, I don't want that anymore." And you have the leader of the WACA has to back him up. This is my announcer. And those things happen. And I think one of my best events, and we got a minute there, but I think one of my most fun opportunities where I really helped somebody out. I think in what you're saying, confidence, was when we were in Londonderry, Ireland, Northern Ireland. This is when Clinton was kind of helped the Northern Ireland Protestant Catholic kind of battles going on up there. And we were in Londonderry, and there was this crowd of about 18,000 people in an outdoor event, and on the stage. And I had this taxi driver who was driving me around and got to know him. But as we drove around doing certain things, he was lamenting about he couldn't never get a date. You know, he wasn't the most smooth-looking guy in the world. He was kind of clumsy and all that, and not much confidence. And so the day of the event, and he was taking real good care of me, running me everywhere. I'm up there doing a test, on the microphone and the stage. So I'm out here, and there's 18. I mean, they were just a throng of people. And I go, okay, you go stand right over there, and so I can see in case I got to do something. Okay, I'll stand over here. So I stood him over there on the other side of the rope line, and I get up there and I say, test, 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 tap the mic, the things you do, check, check, check. And then I go, okay, ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention for a second? And they all stop, 18,000, and I go, I just want you all to know that if it wasn't for right down here, please spread out here, and and I say John or whatever his name was, I don't want to say it, but hey, I want you all to know if it wasn't for John right here, that young man right there, the president would never have come to Northern Ireland. So you guys, and I understand that he's single, and there must have been 50 girls just right by him. Wow. I said, now, if you want a guy with connections, that's John right there. And
that's pretty good.
I think his life went a little bit better after that. I'm not sure.
Anybody's life would go really better after that moment. I mean, this is such a good story, and it's like there's so many things we can talk about in the second half. So before we let y'all go, man, we are talking to retired Colonel Kelley Crooks, Air Force, and guess what? It's time for a commercial break. I know you guys don't like it, but we have to support who's supporting us. Don't touch your iPhone. We're on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spotify. We will be right back.
Welcome to Rockefeller's Barbershop. This is the day that the Lord has made, and I will be blessed and be glad in Him. Today I want to introduce myself. My name is Rico Rodriguez at Rockefeller's Barbershop here in San Antonio, Texas, 1733 Babcock Road. My phone number is 210-782-5188. And again, we do walk-ins on Sundays. You are listening to I Am Refocused podcast on iHeartRadio. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.
Does your website need more traffic? Well, visit overflowcafe.com today. They make websites popular, and over 41,000 people use their service to gain more customers. They are winning our business. What about you? Visit overflowcafe.com today.
Hey, welcome back, y'all. This is I'm Refocused Podcast. We are talking to retired Air Force Colonel Kelley Crooks, and he was talking to us on the first half a little bit about the White House experience. Were there any more stories before we exit the White House that you want to tell the audience?
You get a lot of stories and golfing stories. People said that Bill Clinton cheated at golf. Not any more than anybody else, I guess. Let's just say that. I did have a little propensity to be a mean kind of person, so we were out there once, and he hit it off in the rough, and everybody was looking for his ball because he doesn't like to just throw another one out there. And so we're all looking, and I find his ball, and I put the cart in front of it, and I wait and I watch them all looking, and I kind of step on a little bit and push it into the ground and make the harder shot. And then I act like I just found it. Oh, here it is, and they come over, and he looks at it, and he looks at me, because he knew you can see the ball was stepped on, right? Or I was driving, and it was there. I missed it. I must have run over it. Sorry, sir. I found it.
That's funny.
Yeah, a lot of them like that.
I was going to say, can you make an impression of the president?
Bill Clinton, yeah, he just had that voice like that. Hey, I thought Monica was, a little bit older.
Oh, man. Oh, that's funny. Yeah. That is funny. Now, transition to another story he's telling you during the break. What was the exit like coming out the White House? Was it a smooth transition, or was it just, well, another assignment?
Just another assignment. I was selected for school, and then they came and said, hey, you can either go to school or you can go to take command of a squadron. And I made a choice. That was another time I made a choice. It was probably the wrong choice, but I said I'll go take the squadron first because there's fewer of those. And if you want to make up with the senior ranks, you got to take those commands when they're offered. Yeah. So I had a command, and it was out in Utah, and it was the only squadron of its kind, because radar evaluation, where we actually would go around to all these FAA radars and optimize them for airliners who are slow and big, and Air Force fighters who are fast, and small. And so our guys, I had 26 electrical and mechanical engineers, second lieutenants and first lieutenants. And so I walk into this squadron of 500, 600, 700 people, and most of the people were smarter than I was in some way or another, because they're all engineers, right? And I had no idea what they were talking about. So they had to teach me about radars a little bit more. But the interesting thing about that job was that they were just finishing up this huge billion-dollar effort to optimize all these new ARSA 4 FA radars. And so they were trying to figure out, what are we going to do next? What's on the table? You can go around and maintain and things, but that's boring. And I found that they had created their own way to record all these different types of radars. Now, each radar would have a different signal. They go out and send a signal out and burp, and blip back, and all of them were different frequencies and doing different things. And so they were able to take this recorder, record it all, and then they were integrating these signals together to create a complete picture. And so we had incidents where the rescue folks, the people who do crashes and all that, airline accidents, we had a capability that wasn't being used or popularized. And so during the time I was there, they had, right before I got there, they had the Cuban Brothers to the Rescue thing, where we had U.S. flights go into the Cuban airspace, and they shot down one. And my guys actually found that the one guy they shot down was the only one who didn't go into the airspace. And so they went before Congress, or they talked to somebody, sent in a report. After that, we had TWA 800 crashed. Swiss Air 111, I think, crashed. We had a C-130 out in the Pacific lose all its power, and they turned to try and get back to the U.S., and the rescue people went out to where they lost power and were doing a search, and it's a huge ocean. And they came to us finally and said, hey, do you guys see anything? And we said, well, our blips tell us the plane crashed over here. They actually found a staff sergeant still alive in the ocean and saved his life. He was in, he didn't have much longer to live. We've had people who crash, and so they would be able to show different debris fields, more information of all these accidents. And so it became where we ended up, during my time there, in a letter of agreement with Air Force Search and Rescue and people like that, to say they come to us and we will create these pictures of the accident. So it's a new mission area that we created, and I thought that was great. Our troops and the lieutenants and those young people felt revitalized. Yeah. This is something more exciting than watching a plane do squares and optimize a radar by tweaking this and that.
I mean, that's very interesting. Like, was that a challenge? I'm sure it was a challenge, but how much pressure really was it to do that kind of assignment?
To me, it was just learning what they're doing and understand it. To them, it was something that they knew and they were learning, so it was just putting together and putting a mission to it. Yeah. They offered me a capability, and I thought about this gap out there in the military, and I said, hey, can you support that? And they said, let us figure this out, and I gave it to them. I said, let me know if you guys can do this, and they started doing it. And from there, we were actually opening up an office in Alaska and New York, and I had these little operating locations because they wanted to be next to all the big centers, operation centers for the FAA and the Air Force. And so that was good for them. I mean, they really felt like the squadron was energized, and they were doing things. And they got a lot of awards for it. I mean, we were underneath a group, or a next level up was in Langley. And we're out in Utah, right? And so all these awards are usually, all the people at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia got all the local awards. Well, we had to only send in paper. They'd go before a board, and we'd send in paper packages. The first quarter of these awards, we won 7 out of 8. Dang. Because of their capability and mission. And so these guys start winning awards. And that's how you build whether it's in a company or whatever, is build a cohesive group, is that they know that they can be recognized for their work. Right. And you can't pay military people more. So how do you do it? You got to give them awards, recognition, pats on the back, a good mission. People in the community, if you're not a military person, you have a bunch of military people under you in a company. And you go in there and you do your quarterly report, and your quarterly report is EBITDA and revenue and money and this and that. They get bored. They don't really care about that much. They want to know, who are we helping? How much are we helping? Is what I'm doing important? The money's good, pay me, but I'm used to not making a lot of money. So in my industry days after I retired, I had fights with the senior leadership going, you can't come in here in a Cadillac rental car and say that we're losing money. You can't come in here and say, money is tight, we're going to have to do this and that. They don't care one way or the other as long as they get their paycheck, a small bonus, some recognition, and a feeling that the mission is being accomplished. And what is that mission? And I found that is a very big, it's a dichotomy between the commercial people who've never been in a service area and people who have been. And, you probably see that or hear that on a lot of the shows that we have.
Yeah, I mean, that's very interesting because we can almost segue into this part of the show where, say someone out there who is thinking about joining the Air Force. Yeah. Okay, they haven't made that decision, but they kind of have that gut feeling like this might be my call. What words of wisdom will you give to that person who just wants to take that next step and join?
It's a different, it's not your father's Air Force. That's what they always say, right? And it's changing a lot. I think it changed a lot over the last administration with social changes and political correct stuff. And I'm either way, it's all right with me because the military has been that way for a long time. They first to integrate, first to have women in it, first to do a lot of things because they are told to do it and they adapt. They figure it out. I think that people coming in need to be aware of that when you go into the military, you got to kind of drop your biases, anything you have, and go in and say, these are my friends, these are the people who have my back, these are the people I support. If you can't have that kind of thing, it's tough to come into the military today. I would say that when you get in, the military you give it a little bit of thought, but the military gives a lot of thought to where you need to be to enhance your career and enhance with the needs of the military or the Air Force. And I rarely told them where I wanted to go or try and influence the system, because the system will take care of you if you do your job. Focus on the job. Focus on what you're doing. And if you have good leadership above you, they will ensure that you get to that minimum peak, and then you can, with your performance, you can get to the next level. So as an enlisted person in the Air Force, you can get to Master Sergeant just almost on your own. Chief and Senior, it usually takes a little bit more, better, reports, performance reports, and things like that. And the officers the same. And then when you go in, volunteer. The old Army days, they say never volunteer, always step back, let everybody else step forward. Yeah. Volunteer for almost everything. I have had opportunities in the Air Force because I said, sure, why not? I was able, as a captain in NORAD, I was in Cheyenne Mountain, inside this mountain, NORAD, in North American Aerospace Defense Command, and captain upstairs in the command center, we're running all air defense stuff and missile defense. He calls down and says, hey, Kelley, he's another captain. He goes, you want to go to this OWC play thing? And I go, okay, what is it? And he goes, well, we're going to go sing and dance on the play with all these Officers' Wives Club, for the Officers' Wives Club to make money for the Officers' Wives. And they give it to the young enlisted and all that. I said, sure. So we go do this, and we find out that the other officers who are in this play are the 4-star commander-in-chief, Sync NORAD, the 3 stars, the 2 stars, the colonels, and here you get these 2 captains out there having fun. I was able to meet and talk to, my boss's boss's boss, singing beside them, dancing beside them, and their wives. And just because I said yes, I then was able to be be a young officer who was known as opposed to other ones. I said yes. I always said yes to things and tried them, especially when it had to do with media or video and things that I love. And I come up with so many different stories from remote. I mean, I'm probably one of the only guys in remote Alaska who gets to go out there and dance with Miss America because she came up there, and you just, hey, you want to come up? Yeah, sure, why not?
That's a good response. Yeah, sure, let's do it.
Yeah, sure, try it.
I mean, it's very interesting because I just talked to someone on another show. She travels the world, and what she likes to do, she speaks for companies and leadership conferences, all that, but she actually lives in other countries. She speaks 6 different languages. Yeah. And she stays there and works in the culture. Like, she gets an actual job.
Right.
And it was one thing that was interesting being said on that show. We were talking about, it's almost like every opportunity she took was like a red box. Just a little analogy. As she was on her journey, she met someone that had a red box that gave her another opportunity. Like you were saying about just volunteering, making yourself available. You never know when that opportunity strikes.
You never know. The people you meet. I tell people that if you're on an airplane, I'll sit on an airplane, and we'll fly a couple hours, and this person next to you never says a word. They're into their own thing. And near the end of it, I go, and there have been a couple times I go, boy, I would like to have, gotten to know you a little bit, and maybe we could have exchanged some cool stories. But, at the beginning, I'll always say hi and what do you do? But then you get that feeling, they don't want to talk. Yeah. And you go, man, you just missed out. We missed out. We didn't connect.
That's true.
And that's a business card you never know. You never know who you run into. And you should be able to say hi to almost anybody around you and find something where you can talk to them. I don't care if you're white, black, green, blue, tall, old, short, whatever. If you look at that person and say, how can we connect, and you look for that, you'll find it. There's something.
And that's the key word, look.
I always wear my Ohio State shirt because invariably, I think that I've been pretty close to being involved in growing the club here. From when I took over, I did a stint as the president of the local alumni club about 7 or 8 years ago, and I did about 4 or 5 years. I would wear my shirt everywhere. We grew from 30 to almost 300. And one of the reasons was I would wear the shirt, and almost everybody who was a Buckeye, Ohio, whatever, would say something. This is an advertisement, right? And I'd stop. I wouldn't just answer them, they go, OH, and I go, Ohio, and walk on. I'd always stop. Hey, do you know about our club? Do you know this? Give them a card, whatever, and I got business cards for everybody. If you do that, they might show up at the game. And I've had many, many, many come in and go, hey, you remember me? We met here, we met there, and I came to the game. And then they have a great time. And I have Michigan people, they'll razz me. Well, I met a Michigan person. Well, once you get over the razzing, then you find the connection, and you become friends.
It's like that first sourness sweet commercial.
Yeah. And so my big shout out to Fran and Mal. Fran is Ohio State. Mal is a Michigan guy, and now they're like our best friends. And we met them up at San Marcos at the was it Tanger or whatever, the outlet mall. Oh, yeah. And I'm wearing my shirt, and I hear this OH in the corner, and I go, I-O, and then I hear this MI, or whatever. But, when we start talking, and now, I find out they live down the street down here and things, and that's the connection. Now we go out and, have beer and do this and that and have a good time.
That's true. It's funny, but it's true because a lot of times people go through their whole life with no connections.
No connections.
And it's mainly like, hey, you can be the connection to somebody that can give you the opportunity.
Look up from your cell phone.
Yeah.
Look around, and there's people out there.
In today's world, that's a perfect transition because in today's world, you became a teacher after you served the military. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that experience with the kids.
I did the industry for a while, and I found out that I love the people in mentoring, but a lot of the people in industry just care about the money and the contracts. And I was frustrated with the contracts and the money. And I said, what can I do to mentor? I love mentoring. And my kids are grown, and I always enjoyed teaching my kids at dinner, whatever, math and English and all the weird things that are out there they can learn. And I had this void, and so I said, okay, I'll go get a master's degree. I got a master's degree in education at Wayland Baptist. Big shout out to them. And one of the instructors was a principal. And I had a potential job at one of these local schools, and then she said, hey, I want you to come teach, or at least try out for our fourth grade math position. And I went in, and she said, you got that job, and I taught that. And fourth grade is such a great grade. These kids are just changing. They're starting to become, in the double digits, 9 to 10-year-old, 9 to 11. And they're very malleable, and they listen, and they love, and I was... It was great for me because I was the only man in the school. You had a couple of other guys who were doing special things, maybe like elementary or kindergarten ESL, Spanish language kids. There was a guy down there. And then there was Adolfo, who was the custodian. And then there was Colonel C. And Colonel C was everything as far as male testosterone in that school. And the kids, it was interesting, the kids saw me as almost God, it was like he was the father, he was the grandfather, and I would do high fives and fist bumps, and it wore me out every day. The other teachers, there's so many women around, it's very female centric in elementary school, nurturing.
Yeah.
And men are not nurturers as much as protectors. And so our philosophies were different. And you really do have a tougher time in elementary school than middle school and all that, because the teachers would want to nurture, and then if you do wrong, send you to the office or whatever. I would try and solve it. Yeah. So if kids were fighting or doing something, I'd say, you go sit over there, and then we'll talk later. They would send them to the office. And the kids enjoyed the fact that they would be protected in the environment. I'd say, hey, go play, have fun, but just don't do this, and this. Yeah. I'd move the soccer this away from the fence or do that, and I'd set up a perimeter of safety and let them have fun. Women have a tendency, I think, to go, don't do this, don't do that, because I'm trying to protect you as a person, not the environment. There is a different philosophy, and so I kind of bumped heads a little bit with other women who didn't know how to understand this weird new teacher who was older and all that, and so it was tough. But I enjoyed it. The kids were open and they learned things. I'm amazed at how much kids don't know. They have a lack of curiosity today, and I substitute. And I ask people, even in the 7th and 8th grade, I ask them questions, and I don't know. So, do you know this? No, I don't do that. I don't know this. Is it on my cell phone? Can I use my cell phone? And I'm going, there's no sense of curiosity. And parents, the one thing you can do for your kids is build a sense of curiosity. Yeah. I don't care what the answer they get. Is have them go read a newspaper. You should not get rid of a newspaper. We had Sig Christensen on, and we were talking about that. He's a reporter for San Antonio Express News, and the thing is that newspapers are going away because people get on their cell phones and read this and that. But get out a newspaper so that the kids can actually open it up, even though it's anything. Find something that interests them: the sports, the headlines, comics. Get them to read, and then take a break and have them read it. And then when you go to dinner, don't get on your cell phone talking to you. Yeah. I see so many times where I see two parents on the phones and the kids are on the phones, and nobody's talking.
Checking emails.
Nobody's talking. They're all on their own phones, and until the food comes, and then they eat real quick, and then they get on their phones waiting for dessert. And you go, gosh, connect.
And that is a very key word, the lack of connection today, versus we're connected to our phones so much where our phones know more about us than actual people.
Yeah.
So people don't know nothing about you because you're all tied into your phone.
And I worry about that because my background is information assurance, network security, right? Defensive. And I get on the radio all the time and I talk about, hey, did you hear about this? Did you hear about that? People, they're tracking you. I'm very libertarian when it comes to cameras and things. Inside a business, no problem. You entered their business. But out in the public, we don't need to be tracked everywhere. I just read yesterday that there is some apps out there that are for kids. Where the kids are on, they're running motor cars or they're doing games, that the apps are selling the kids' location to Google and things like that. And they're allowing Google and other people to track kids and where their locations are. I'm going, they're getting sued by California because they just found this out. Wow. But it's got to be everywhere. So you got to be very careful with what you let your kids look at. Look at the privacy piece and what are you allowing when you say yes. but mostly get the kids out of the electronics and get them back to paper. Read a book. They can't track your book.
No.
They can't track your
Go
newspaper.
outside, play some
Go
basketball,
outside and play.
football. I mean, them days.
Yeah.
Because, we just went out.
Yeah.
We didn't stay locked in the doors.
No, we didn't. And we'd come home, we'd leave, or go to school, come back, go outside with our buddies or whatever. And, I remember in Pennsylvania, we had a light bulb, street light, and we'd go over there if it was night, and we'd kick it to knock the light out. And it took us about 3 or 4 months of kicking to get that thing loose enough that it actually went out. And so we'd hang out by the blacked out light and just mess around. And then you go home at, sometime before around bedtime, and you were outdoors all the time. Now kids are indoors all the time.
And speaking of kids, during the break, you were telling about your daughter. She's into filmmaking and producing and writing. Tell us a little about that.
Well, I got 2 girls. One's up at Texas Tech, and she's finishing up her master's in psychology, and she's working in a restaurant. She loves cheese, I guess, and she's a cheesemonger at a restaurant, and she loves kids. She's going to be substitute teaching up there, and so big shout out to her. And then the other one's Carly, and she's over in Aspen, Colorado. She's a nomad. She's gone from high school to Universal, down to Florida, went up to, said, Dad, I'm going to go to Canada. And she went up to Canada for a while, and then she said, I'm going to go out to L.A., and she stopped in Chicago for a couple of weeks, and then she went to Nebraska for a year, and now she's in Aspen working her way west, I guess. But she loves movies, so she writes, and she just writes a script, and she's written TV scripts and movie scripts, and she just finished. I helped her produce a little movie, and it's something about monsters in a theater, and it's a long title, and I don't have it at my fingertips, but I've read it. And when she writes me a script, it's like 50, 60 pages or so, and it's about a regular hour and a half movie. I read it all, and I go through it, and I go, she is pretty good at writing, and I'm very impressed. And so she produced it. I bought her a movie camera, a real live, red, whatever they call it, red box, movie camera, and that kind of stuff. And so she's out there filming. She got actors and contracted actors and choreographers, and she's learning by hard knocks. And I'm very proud of her doing that. And the whole family's kind of proud of her, but she's out there by herself trying to do this, and it's a tough life.
Because that all ties back into what we talked about in the beginning of the show, of just doing it. Just go out, make that first step. And like you said, when you was in your military career, when you went, you started from that point on. They're the ones that hand you the assignment and say, this is your next assignment.
Just say, hey, point me in the right direction. I'll do my best.
And that's what we all can do as we're trying to pursue our careers and make a living. Just show up. I mean, part of success is just show up.
It's true. And I'll go to a barber shop, and they always ask you, what do you want? And I go, I don't know. That certificate's yours. It's not mine. I don't know. Well, what number are you? Certificate. That's yours. Just make me look good. If you make me look like George Clooney, you were successful. If I look like, Little Abner or whatever like that.
You got to fight with a lawnmower.
Then you didn't do so well.
That's funny. Now, when it comes to what you're doing today, what's some organizations that you're part of that you like to plug in?
Well, I love the AFCEA, the Military City USA radio show that you engineer, and you and Mark up there, and my co-host Mark Fry, and AFCEA, Armed Forces Communications Electronics Association, sponsors us. We do a Saturday morning radio show that's an hour long at 8 o'clock on KLUP 9:30 a.m. The Answer. People should check into that. It's really great. We interview people from the mayor to authors, singers, actors, military senior officers, and it's fun. I enjoy it. I part of associated with down in Galveston, the former American Undersea Warfare Center, now the Galveston's Naval Museum, and I just wrote a book about there's 2 ships down there, the USS Stewart destroyer and the USS Kavala submarine, and they're World War II ships and submarine that's actual there sitting at the park, and people go tour them and look around. And so I wrote about their history and the history of Pelican Island down there in Galveston. Used to be an immigration site, so you had Ellis Island in New York. Down in the south there had Galveston was a big immigration where they had 750,000 immigrants coming through in the 1800s, and that was a quarantine area, just like Ellis Island was, and people would be processing through there. There's a lot of interesting stories there, so it's kind of like one of those books that have a lot of pictures with captions and things from World War II. And the Kavala was a unique submarine in which it sank. It was the only submarine to sink a carrier that attacked Pearl Harbor. So it was kind of it was critical in the turning point of the war at the Turkey shoot at Marianas Islands, and that's where the U.S. forces met the Japanese carriers and decimated a lot of the Japanese carriers, which kept them from continuing the war. And so that was like a turning point of the war, and Kavala was instrumental in finding that Japanese task force so we can intercept them. So good story about them and the people, and shout out to we just lost one of our World War II heroes from back then who served on the Kavala, Captain Zeke Zelmer, who passed away at 95 years old, and he was instrumental. So big shout out to him.
Man, speaking of stories, if you all want more stories, you have a book that you're working on.
Warships at Seawolf Park is the book, and it'll be coming out November 5th. And,
nice.
Take a look for it, and it's just a fun story thing about World War II submarines and ships.
And will they be able to find it on Amazon or a website?
Arcadia Publishing is publishing it out, and so Warships at Seawolf Park, and it'll be fun just to read it. I enjoyed writing it. And it didn't seem to take me long either. I just kind of, once I got into it, the stories just flowed. I got diaries from some of the guys who were on the ships and subs, and so reading some of their diaries is kind of interesting. Do I have time for a quick story? Okay. So I was reading it, and this kid was writing. He was a young radio man or something, and he says that when they were out there after this turkey shoot, and they were off the island about 2 miles, and they could see the island and the battle going on. They saw things blowing up and tanks and whatever, and planes flying and all that, and they were amazed at what they were watching, but they got bored, and so they went swimming. And so they're out there, and all these planes are flying everywhere, and these guys are so brash that they just decided, let's go swim for a couple hours, and everybody thought they were just totally crazy. But I can understand that if you're a submariner and you're underwater for a couple months, you want to get away and do something crazy. So these kids were crazy, and those are the type of stories I have in it.
Well, this was a awesome experience. I mean, we had if you're sitting down or standing up, whatever, with headphones or speakers, you just have VIP look into military. I mean, from the White House to all these different stories to your own kids and teaching kids. It doesn't get better than this. So I want to say thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Thank you.
To be on the show, Iron Refocus podcast. And we definitely, man, when you come out with that book, we might have to bring you back.
Yeah. And I got to tell people, keep listening to this show, because if it's inspirational, if you talk about connecting, you're part of that. You are connecting people out there, and whether they're, like I said, any color, any size, any religion. Yeah, it's that sense of inspiration and connection.
As long as you're breathing air, hey,
I appreciate it.
We're all human beings trying to eat, sleep, and keep moving.
And what I love is when we're at the radio station, I'm talking, I do a rant right before our show, and I'll see Shemaiah, he's over there, he's nodding. He goes, yep.
I'm trying to keep the peace, right? No, that's funny. That's even another topic. So I'm going to get us out of the show. Just like we always say, y'all, every single Thursday, any day we do a show. Sometimes we do a show on Skype. You guys and ladies, you already know how we do. So the famous last line, keep God first, stay focused, and peace.